Ladies and gentlemen, my name is František Pešina and I would like to welcome you to the presentation about the substantive evaluation of the core research infrastructures in the operational program Research, Development and Education. Let's begin with some general information about the call. The Research Infrastructures call within OPRDE complements national support for research infrastructures. The state support finances the operating costs of research performed by users or external entities of research infrastructures, including contractual and open access research. The support also covers mandatory membership fees to foreign or international research infrastructures and international research and development organizations. The OPRDE call aims at infrastructure development, like completions, constructions, upgrading, modernizations, or in-kind contributions, and research performed by research infrastructures. Research infrastructures, abbreviated as RI, are defined as unique facilities or virtual platforms that provide the research community resources and services that enable them to perform cutting-edge research and development. RIs may be located in one place, distributed, or they may consist of e-infrastructures. They may be parts of multinational networks and can have diverse legal forms. If predefined and transparent conditions are met, RIs may be used also by other research organizations and users. Each research infrastructure fulfills its role by providing resources and services to research community so that it could perform cutting-edge research and development. Also by providing the research community with resources and services under predefined and transparent conditions and enabling utilization of the resources and services by other research organizations. It also will have or already has established opponent group, like for example Scientific Board, by the 31st of December 2017. The Research Infrastructures call was open only for research infrastructures that were evaluated by an international evaluation in 2014 and that met the definition of research infrastructure. For example, they had to be included in the roadmap of large infrastructures for research, experimental development and innovation in the Czech Republic for years 2016 to 2022. Therefore, the OPRDE does not assess whether the applicant is a research infrastructure. The primary purpose of research infrastructures is not their own research, but provision of resources and services to research community. Yet OPRDE requires that research infrastructures also perform their own research. For this reason, the relationship between own project research and the required investments may not be strong. With regard to the setting of the call, where the maximum amount of non-investment costs for individual projects was limited, the implementation team may also include persons who will work on the project and the result of whom will be included in the project, yet these persons will not be paid from OPRDE project. For example, they will not require project funding. There are some mandatory activities that need to be clearly stated in each project. These mandatory activities are, under letter B, support for high-quality proprietary research of the host institution and possibly also partner institutions through the use of the research infrastructure. Under letter C, project management. Content of this activity is described in rules for applicants and beneficiaries, the general part. For more information, see section 5.2.4. Please note that the title must be exactly Project Management. Activity A. Completion, construction, modernization or upgrade of infrastructure in the Czech Republic, including provision of parts of research infrastructures and research facilities to research infrastructures located in other EU states. Material and technical modernization of research infrastructure. It should be included in projects, including investments. Some projects may have in-kind contributions abroad. There are also some excluded activities in the call research infrastructures. Generally, these are the activities supported by the special activity of Ministry of Education, Youth and Sports of the Czech Republic. For more information, see rules for applicants and beneficiaries, the specific part, section 524. These activities include research performed by users or external entities of the research infrastructure, including the open access research and contractual research. They also include membership in foreign or international research infrastructures or internal organizations involved in research and development, in particular mandatory and other membership fees. Please note that excluded activities may be mentioned, but only in the context. Next, ladies and gentlemen, we will provide you some information about indicators. To have most of the informations together, the definitions are always stated in the first paragraph of each relevant slide. Specifications to the call are also included in the presentation. Furthermore, they are described in the Annex number 1. There are three main categories of indicators: obligatory for selection, obligatory for fulfillment, and obligatorily tied. Regarding optional indicators, no target values have to be set. If the applicant chooses the CO24 indicator, obligatory optional for selection, they must also monitor the 20402 indicator. If the applicant does not choose CO24, they do not choose 20402 either. Let's address the indicator CO24, the number of new researchers in supported entities. This indicator is obligatorily optional for selection and optional for fulfillment. The definition of this indicator says that the value of the indicator is measured as the number of all newly created jobs for researchers, converted to FTE. A job is a direct result of the implementation of the project. It must be filled, vacant jobs are not counted, and increase the total number of research jobs in the organization. Research support employees not directly involved in R&D activities are excluded. The indicator focuses on employees. Support may be provided to a new or existing institution. In the case of R&D projects, the duration of employment may be shorter, like project support. Positions created in different projects are added up, if all the listed projects receive support. This is not considered multiple inclusion. In the specification of this indicator is stated that a new employee is the employee who signed the contract first, after the start date of commencement of the project. You can see the modal calculation in the table below. Please note that the worker is counted only once in the year of joining the project. Result, a target value is the sum of values for individual years. Next indicator is CO25, number of researchers working in improved research infrastructures. The value of the indicator is measured as the number of all jobs filled with researchers which are directly related to the performance of R&D activities or which are directly affected by project implementation. For example, it is the sum of FTEs of researchers in supported centers, both centers of excellence and regional R&D centers, expressed in FTEs. A job must fill, vacant jobs are not counted. Research support employees not directly involved in R&D activities are excluded. If the number of jobs increases, these positions are also counted separately towards the indicator CO24. The facilities may be private as well as public. The project must result in an improvement of the supported facility or the quality of its equipment. This means maintenance or replacements that bring no quality improvements are not included. Number of researchers working in modernized research infrastructures within the OPRDE project. This does not mean the operations team of the research infrastructure. Please note that the target value is the sum of FTEs for each year, its so-called cumulative indicator. You can also see the modal calculation in the table below. Indicator 24000. Number of newly built, expanded or modernized research infrastructures and centers of excellence. A research infrastructure is a unique research facility including its resource and related services, established by one or more research organizations and used by the research community for excellent research. Research infrastructures may be located in one place or they may be distributed or virtual. A research infrastructure shall have at least the following basic characteristics. It creates conditions for high quality, excellent, internationally significant research, assessed by the quality of the research facility and its achievements. It also has transparent rules for open access to the infrastructure. Granting of access authorizations must be based on selection of high-quality scientific projects, assessed by the character of criteria for open access and transparency of selection. It has a stable and effective management system, assessed by management structure, personnel policy, risk management, financial model, etc. Center of Excellence. Definition from NCI 2014 to 2020. Thematically profiled research and development center, for example university department, research institute, or clearly organizationally defined unit with separate accounting in which several research institutions work together. Center of Excellence actively performs research activities which are often of an interdisciplinary nature. It programmatically combines R&D, education, especially doctoral students and young researchers, and innovation activities. Center of Excellence achieves critical dimensions in terms of staffing and technical equipment, so as to be able to achieve extremely high-quality research results from international point of view. It establishes long-term strategic partnerships with prestigious foreign R&D institutions, as well as with application subjects and other major national institutions. Revenues from foreign sources, with respect to industry specifics, significantly contribute to the overall R&D budget and the total operating costs of the center. In this call, this indicator is relevant for research infrastructure only. The applicant or beneficiary is required to specify this indicator in the annex to the application for funding or implementation report. Overview of key outputs to meet the ERDF project indicators. Please note that the target value of 1 is added for each infrastructure. This value will be detailed in the annex list of key outputs to meet the ERDF project indicators. As part of the call research infrastructure, this annex is intended only for indicator 24000. The next indicator is 46601. Extended, renovated or newly built capacities without occupation of agricultural land. It is counted in square meters of usable area approved or permitted for use, which was used for renovation or construction of new facilities without occupation, building up of new land. In the case of new premises, this involves the demolition of the original building or the construction of new capacities on a brownfield. It is the environmental indicator. If the applicant performs no construction work and the project only involves equipping the premises with new equipment and devices, the value of this indicator can be 0. The applicant should include the fact that the indicator is relevant for the applicant in a comment to the given indicator. Indicator 20312. Number of participations of supported research teams created within international cooperation programs. This indicator is expressed as the number of research teams from the Czech Republic participating in foreign programs of international cooperation. For projects supported from OPRDE, account will be taken for participation in international cooperation projects, the funding of which was approved after the date of approval of the project by OPRDE. International cooperation programs mean funds which the applicant obtained in international tenders, especially from the EU's framework program for research and innovation called Horizon 2020, including its partial implementation instruments like GTIs, Eurostars, etc., and the program of the European Atomic Energy Community for Nuclear Research and Training, exclusively from international sources. Given that the call does not limit the focus of research projects that could be submitted, the indicator is not restricted by any specific listing of international cooperation programs which could be recognized as part of the indicator. Branches and research focuses of projects can be very specific. The restriction of the indicator only to certain programs could lead to discrimination. Evaluation of this indicator will therefore have to be done by an expert skilled in that field in relation to the research focus and programs of the projects. Please note that this indicator is compulsory elective but optional to fulfill. Indicator 20211 Publications created by supported entities. This indicator is counted as the number of expert publications recorded in Thomson Reuters Web of Science or Scopus, published after the date of approval of the project in OPRDE, where at least one of the co-authors is a researcher of the supported research institution. The indicator 20216, Publications with foreign co-authors created by supported entities, is the subset of the previous indicator. It is counted as the number of expert publications recorded in Thomson Reuters Web of Science or Scopus published after the date of approval of the project in OPRDE, co-authored by researchers from national and foreign institutions. At least one of the co-authors of the publication is a researcher from the supported research institution, and at least one of the co-authors is a researcher from a foreign institution. The next part of the presentation concerns the overview of the evaluation criteria. All the criteria are described in detail in the Annex 2 of the call. Let's address the Criterion 1.1 Structure and Size of Administrative Team. Evaluations cover structure and size of administrative team or workloads, including the possible outsourcing with respect to the nature and scope of activities and size of the project. The administrative team includes project manager, financial manager, and other positions that ensure implementation of the project. The applicant introduces the implementation team within the obligatory activity called project management and the mandatory annex to the application for funding called implementation team. The applicant may also attach CVs of individual members. To summarize this, it means to assess whether the size, structure, and combination of positions in the team correspond to the project's needs. Please note that a project may be fulfilled by persons that are not paid from OPRDE, yet they are not members of the project team. They may be named in project indicators, they may publish, they may be evaluated, they are not financed from the project, and they cannot be reported as co-finance from the project. Criterion 1.2 Structure and Size of Expert Team. Evaluations cover structure and size of expert team, or workloads, including the possible outsourcing with respect to the nature and scope of activities and size of the project. Expert team consists of positions that provide substantive fulfillment of project activities. The applicant introduces the implementation team within the obligatory activity called project management and the mandatory annex to the application for funding called implementation team. The applicant attaches CVs of individual members. Shall be documented for at least 50% of FTE members of the expert team. In the application for funding, the applicant defines key and/or excellent team members. The maximum share of key and/or excellent members of expert team is 20%. This criterion is practically the same as the 1.1 criterion. The only difference is that this is an expert team and there is a stronger link to substantive fulfillment of project activities. Criterion 1.3 Structure, size, manner, and extent of involvement of opponent group. It is assessed whether the applicant has or will have established an opponent group, for example scientific board, by the 31st of December 2017 at the latest. The opponent's group task will be to provide feedback to expert activities performed with regard to the theme of the project. Evaluation covers structure, size, manner, and extent of involvement of the opponent group with respect to the nature and scope of activities and size of the project. The applicant describes this within the obligatory activity project management. For detailed specifications of opponent group, see rules for applicants and beneficiaries, specific part, page 9. The opponent group is a group of external experts, usually operating abroad, who perform observations and provide advice, suggestions, and proposals that contribute to fulfillment of objectives of the research infrastructure and also to the infrastructure's further development. There are many forms of specific cooperation, yet this body would be in continual contact with the research infrastructure and comment on the current crucial issues related to the research program carried on by the infrastructure. One of the possible forms of the opponent group is the Scientific Advisory Board. Please note that some RIs have established their scientific boards already, and it is not our goal to create another similar group. It is only needed to assess whether the boards meet the criteria of the call. If there is no such group, the RI must have it established by the end of 2017. Criterion 2.1 Quality and potential of research program or programs. It is assessed how the project contributes to improvements of quality of existing research projects or quality of new research projects and which benefits the project brings in the area of R&D. In other words, it is needed to evaluate what research programs or projects the RI works on at the moment and how do their requirements contribute to the RI's further development. Criterion 2.2 Quality and potential of research activities of the project. It is assessed whether the research activities are of a high quality and relevant to the research program or programs, and whether they contribute to further development and quality of research programs. Criterion 2.3 Logical and thematic coherence of the project's research objectives in relation to the existing research activities of the research infrastructure. To what extent the research objectives and research activities of the project complement the existing research activities of the research infrastructure. Consider whether the proposed research activities are appropriate and necessary complements to the current research activities and whether there is any overlap. What is the thematic coherence of research objectives and research activities of the project with the existing research activities of the research infrastructure? It is necessary to bear in mind that research is not the primary goal of RIs. Criterion 2.4 Material content and relevance of activities. Evaluation covers the proposed method of implementation of the project and material quality and content of the project. Activities must be planned in accordance with objectives and conditions of the call. The planned project activities must be described in detail and linked to the project budget, including all obligatory activities set out in the call. Setting and description of project activities are key indicators for future project implementation and fulfillment of the project's indicators and objectives, including its benefits and overall meaningfulness. Criterion 2.5 Schedule and logical consistency of project activities. It is assessed whether the proposed schedule of activities, including any tenders, is logical and realistic. Activities must follow each other smoothly. It is assessed whether the continuity of activities has been planned appropriately with respect to capacities of the applicant and his implementation team. Criterion 2.6 Risk management, preparedness for occurrence of risks, and ability to solve them. It is assessed whether the project reflects existence of risks to performance of activities and to financial and operational management of the project. The project must also include methods to prevent the risks and measures to eliminate these risks. The aim of the criterion is to assess the extent to which the applicant is aware of the risks and what mechanisms does he use to eliminate the risks, what he will do in case the problem occur. Evaluation must cover the planned tenders, for example whether the corresponding tenders are planned in line with the project budget, or whether the applicant explains Why does he not plan tenders, for example, because there is a framework agreement already? Criterion 3.1 Appropriateness of selected indicators of outputs and results. It is assessed whether the selected output and result indicators were appropriately chosen for individual activities. It means whether appropriate indicators were selected for the RI. Please note that regarding optional indicators, no target values have to be set. If the applicant chooses the CO24 indicator, which is obligatorily option for selection, they must also monitor the 20402 indicator. If the applicant does not choose CO24, they do not choose 20402 either. Criterion 3.2 Adequacy and feasibility of results and outputs of the project. Evaluation covers appropriateness of setting of quantified indicators in terms of planned project activities. Specifically, evaluations cover feasibility and appropriateness of setting of indicator values in relation to objectives, schedule and budget of the project. Evaluation covers methods used for determining initial and target values. To summarize this, you should assess how big the target values are and whether it is realistic to achieve them. Please note that only the publications that have already been published in Web of Science or Scopus may be included. Only publications created within the OPRDE project may be included. Not all publications that have been published thanks to the use of resources of the research infrastructure. Criterion 3.3 Specification of project outputs. It is evaluated whether the key outputs for the fulfillment of indicators are clearly specified and described. The applicant must specify the key output in annex to the application for funding. You can see the project outputs in the annex summary of key outputs for fulfillment of indicators of the ERDF project. Criterion 4.1 Adequacy and consistency of the budget with the contents and scope of the project. A. Evaluation covers legitimacy of the budget and individual budget items with respect to the project's duration, content of activities, and planned results or outcomes in relation to the research part of the project. Where relevant, it is also necessary to take into account duration and intensity of work with the target group. Whether costs are necessary for implementation of the project or, on the other hand, whether the budget is not undervalued in relation to the research part of the project. B. Evaluation covers clarity of the budget, clarity of breakdown of costs into items and groups, and the degree of their specification. The legitimacy and adequacy of the budget with respect to objectives and content of the project must always be evaluated in commentaries to individual subcriteria. If it is found that the legitimacy of some budget items is not clear or the amount is inadequate, the evaluator shall propose respective budget cuts. C. The adequacy of the project budget means compliance with the 3E rules: economy, efficiency, and effectiveness in terms of financial costs of implementation of activities, outputs, and results following the research part of the project. Especially, it is necessary to consider adequacy of wage, costs, working times of the project implementation team with respect to the quality, expertness, and also duration of its activities related to the target group. For example, work of the facilitator with the target group, preparation of materials for work with the target group. If the applicant intends to implement the project also by the use of external resources, it is necessary to assess whether the acquisition of goods or services or construction work are adequate and necessary for the project, and whether the parameters for the goods and service are adequate. Adequacy of leased space with respect to the needs of the project. Adequacy of quantity and characteristics of the acquired IT equipment. Proportionality individual budgetary chapters. For example, proportionality of equipment acquisition for the implementation team and working times of members of the team. whether the items correspond to the prices common at the given place and time, whether individual items correspond to the prices recommended in the rules for applicants and beneficiaries or in the call. The adequacy and accuracy has to be evaluated both for individual budget items or groups or items and the budget as a whole in order to avoid a situation where only certain parts of the budget were evaluated while others were not taken into account. Criterion 4.2 Adequacy and efficiency of costs of investment equipment. To what extent do the cost of completion, construction, modernization and upgrading of research infrastructure and equipment correspond to the needs of research programs and activities and achievement of project objectives during implementation? Take into account the adequacy of costs of completion, construction, modernization and upgrading of infrastructure and equipment with respect to common prices of similar equipment and infrastructure. If the costs do not comply with 3E, the evaluator formulates a reservation and proposes budget cuts. Criterion 4.3 General conditions for eligibility of expenditure. Assessment is made of the budget from the perspective of the general conditions of eligibility of expenditure. For example, substantive, local and temporal eligibility of expenditure in the budget. If the application for funding contains an ineligible expenditure, the evaluator shall propose removal of this item from the budget. Criterion 4.4 Method of securing co-financing at the implementation stage. It is assessed whether the applicant is able to meet the co-financing commitment. Criterion 5.1 Use of the existing infrastructure of the research center for the project. To what extent will the existing infrastructure and equipment of the research infrastructure be used for implementation of research programs and project activities? Consider effectiveness and efficiency of the existing infrastructure and equipment for implementation of research agenda. Again, we emphasize that the link between infrastructure and research agenda of the project does not need to be strong. Criterion 5.2 Parameters of investments for implementation of the project's research agenda. Are the parameters of investments in infrastructure and equipment clear and realistic? Do the parameters of investments in infrastructure and equipment correspond to research programs and project activities? Are the parameters of investments in infrastructure and equipment adequate to the needs for development of the research infrastructure? Projects that do not contain activity A shall receive full points for this criterion. Criterion 5.3 Feasibility of the plan and schedule of tenders for completion, modernization and upgrading of infrastructure. Are the plan and schedule of tenders for completion, construction, modernization and upgrade of the infrastructure clear and realistic? Do the plan and schedule correspond to research programs and project activities? Do the plan and schedule of tenders correspond to the plan and schedule of implementation of research programs and project activities? Do the plan and schedule of tenders correspond to the plan and schedule of recruitment of project team? Do the plan and schedule of tenders take into account the statutory deadlines and a reasonable float? Projects that do not contain activity A shall receive full points for this criterion. Criterion 5.4 Identification of risks and measures to prevent the risks and reduce their impact in terms of reachability of project objectives. To what extent are the major risks for investments or investment readiness identified in the project application? Consider the quality of evaluation of severity of the risks. Consider the efficiency of measures to prevent the risks and reduce their impact in terms of reachability of project objectives. Consider whether the project application contains a contingency plan for dealing with occurrence of several major risks at the same time. Criterion 6.1 Activities promoting equal opportunities. It is assessed whether equal opportunities are ensured regardless of the type of disability or social disadvantage, or health, economic, social, ethnic, gender, or nationality. Specifically, it is assessed how are the equal opportunities fulfilled through the proposed activities. A possible example of taking account of equal opportunities within the project is a provision of barrier-free space for the project. Criterion 6.2 Activities supporting sustainable development. Evaluation covers relationship of the project to sustainable development, especially its environmental pillar. Specifically, it is necessary to evaluate proposals aimed at the reduction of negative environmental impacts, like minimization of noise emissions, air emissions, environmental contamination, etc. Or, on the other hand, the project's contribution to environmental improvements. It is also necessary to take into account and assess the project's contribution to raising awareness of sustainable development, especially of environmental issues. Prudent use of natural resources, where appropriate, and the project's contribution to strengthening of social and economic pillars of sustainability. If applicable, the application for funding shall include environmental output indicator, extended, renovated, or newly built capacities without occupation of agricultural land. If applicable, it shall be checked whether the project is to be carried out on plots that are part of specially protected areas or areas belonging to Natura 2000 network. It is necessary to check layers of the protected areas and layers of cadastral maps. Criterion 6.3 Activities supporting non-discrimination. It is assessed whether the project does not discriminate certain groups. Criterion 7.1 Compliance with RIS 3. It is assessed whether the project's activities or content are in accordance with RIS 3 specified in the text of the call and whether they contribute to fulfillment of the strategies. The applicant must specify the project's compliance with the RIS 3 strategy or with its defined areas. This shall be done in a separate annex, links of project activities to the strategic objectives of the national strategy RIS 3. The project or its substantive focus must comply with at least one generic knowledge domain or at least one key application sector and application topic listed in the national RIS 3 strategy or its regional annex. The matrix relevant to assessing the above is also available in the document OPRDE on the page 25. Applicants shall describe how did they contribute to scientific outputs in the area or knowledge domain, for example, related publications, patents, expert works, joint projects with companies or government bodies, or describe verbally their compliance with RIS 3. Ideally, the applicant should name scientific outputs, at least 5. In case the applicant does not define compliance with the domain, but with the application area, evaluation of compliance of the substantive focus of the project with at least one generic knowledge domain, or at least one key application sector and application theme, listed in the National Strategy RIS 3 or its regional annex, is at the discretion of the evaluator. Here you can see the aforementioned metrics from the document OPRDE. Criterion 8.1 CBA. Here, the evaluation shall cover the application in terms of outputs of CBA, or socio-economic analysis, drawn up by the applicant in the CBA IS KP 14+ module. Applicants were allowed to perform the socio-economic analysis with values and results above the indicator values. They must explain each such difference in the mandatory annex feasibility study. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please allow me to finish the presentation with the overview of some general principles of application assessment. The first of these principles is the context. Before completing the assessment, the evaluator should study the application thoroughly, including all annexes. Evaluation must then be made on the basis of all the information contained in the application or annexes, for example, when assessing the outputs indicators Account must be taken of the research focus and specificity of the project. The second principle, coherency. The entire evaluation should be consistent. If any fault is found, it should be reflected in the comment and scoring. The overall conclusion of the evaluation must be in accordance with the final score. Third, comments. If a criterion is not awarded the maximum score, it is necessary to explain it in a comment. The comment should also be provided if the full score is awarded, yet if the score is lower, a comment is absolutely necessary. The comment must be clear why the score was reduced. Specificity. Comments or objections must be as specific as possible. Completeness. No contact with the applicant is permitted. The entire evaluation must be based on information provided by the applicant in the application and its annexes. Providing additional information is not allowed. If presented information does not allow the relevant criterion to be correctly evaluated, the evaluator shall award the lowest score and provide the appropriate comment. Contact. In case of doubt, you can ask the relevant contact person at the MA. At the end of evaluation, MA will conduct quality control of the evaluation report. See the above principles. Thank you for your attention.